Welcome back to Sideways, a podcast about motorcycles in Taiwan. I'm Michael Branica, a YouTuber and off-road riding enthusiast, and with me I have Sasha Finster, who's an off-road riding instructor with Moto Skills Factory.
Hello.
Yeah, so today we have an exciting topic, and that topic is seat height. It's one of those things that gets people quite wound up online. Recently, I posted on Facebook a video, and I think you commented on that one, or you liked it or something. And I had a guy who got quite worked up about the height of the seat, he rides an S-Max. He does not ride an off-road bike. So not to disparage anyone, but it's interesting. People get quite worked up about it, and I guess I just wanted to start out and ask you, in a simple yes or no, do you think seat height matters?
Yes, it does. Definitely.
Yes.
Especially for me, I'm 171, right, centimeters tall, short, right. Unless I'm riding a chopper, I always have a problem with seat height. Always. Right? My only secret weapon is my weight. So when I get on the bike lowers itself because I'm not the skinniest type. But yeah, it always matters. It is, definitely.
Yeah, and I would say yes as well. And I'm 5'10", which is about 174 centimeters, and so honestly, I'm kind of the height that they make bikes for. But when I started riding off road, I was dropping my bike all the time, and I was like, I wish I had gotten the low seat. And I became convinced, like many people do, that a lower seat would help. But I looked at the price of lower seats, and I was like, no, I will just ride better. And then I got to the point where I didn't drop it so much anymore. And so one of the misconceptions that I see all the time online is people say, I am this height, X height, somewhere below 6 foot, and I want to put both feet flat on the ground to ride off-road. And what do you think about that? If somebody asked you that, what would you say?
One thing, we've been doing quite some ADV introduction events, and many of the riders who are interested in ADV riding, they have no off-road background whatsoever. So the first thing that we tell them, one thing that you have to do, it's 110% must. One thing that you must do in order to start riding off-road, or actually just, enjoy riding off-road, unless you're 180 above, is to give up completely, just throw that idea out the window, that you could, should, and must place both feet on the ground. Right? Just as long as you clinch to that, drive, that goal, that feeling, you cannot improve. That's simple. Because there is no way, unless you get extreme plastic surgery or whatever, or wear pumps or whatever, as boots. There is no way you can put both feet down on the ground. Yes, you can get, for example, in Taiwan, the newest Honda Africa Twin 1100, which is the Asia version. You can place both feet on the ground, but you have basically zero ground clearance for an ADV bike, right? So it doesn't make any sense because the trails, the roads that bike can ride are not really challenging, right? So and the trails that you would want to place both legs down, that bike cannot handle because of the lacking ground clearance, right? But right now we're just talking about the right height and not the ground clearance, And so this is one thing that we always tell people, is like, if you like this, if you want to get into off-road riding, and this goes with small bikes and big bikes as well. The small bikes are even taller than the big bikes a lot of times, right? Yes, they're lighter, they have narrower seats, everything, but they're even taller. Yes, if you can place both feet on the ground, good for you. But what I also tell them when I was back in Germany at the BMW training facilities, they have instructors that are 203 centimeters tall, over 2 meters. They have the bar risers, everything, and they still, it looks like they're riding a Grom, MSX, right? And it's just still, yes, they can place both feet on the ground, but they have not the most comfortable, enjoyable ride position, right? So yeah, it's just delete that, right? The sooner you get rid of that request of placing both feet on the ground, the sooner we can get to work. That's simple, and improve skills, and you can have more fun, whatever, and we can find ways how to improve that. Because if you don't let go of that, it's always, you're chasing, a dream, that will never come to you, right? So.
Yeah, and really, for proper riding technique, you should be having your feet on the pegs as much as possible, because those are the control points. And so if you feel like you need to splay your legs out and be dabbing all the time anyway, you're using bad technique. You might break an ankle, and you're not controlling the bike because your butt doesn't really control the bike all that well. And then, it doesn't matter how short the bike is, you'll eventually get into a situation where you're riding on rocks or you're riding on a side hill, and it doesn't matter if you're 2 meters tall, your foot won't reach the ground. And at that point, you need to use proper technique, which we'll get into, in a little bit. But I noticed that the Japanese bikes, they usually have these dual sports that are not, the suspensions aren't super capable, and they're obviously aimed at people just to scramble around, run up some trails here and there. And they have low seats, and they do have good ground clearance, because they were designed that way. So they'll have regular dirt bike ground clearance, but the seat will be really low. But the thing is, for us normal size individuals, we feel like our knees are up underneath our armpits, because physically, if you lower the seat, you either have to lower the whole bike and take it out of ground clearance, or you compress it, and you compress the whole cockpit, and you bring your legs up. And so I guess that's how taller people feel on normal bikes all the time. There's definitely an advantage to having a short bike when you go to turn around or you're in the rocks. For instance, my friend and I, we rode the whole length of the Wujie riverbed. I think they call it 58, from Wujie all the way down to the 16, and tons and tons of rocks. I was riding my Husqvarna. It was very tall, and I dropped my bike quite a few times. And he was riding his brand new CRF 250L, and it was lowered just like all the ones that were coming in at that time. And he didn't drop his bike one time. But when we got to the end, he had a bash plate on it, a skid plate, but that skid plate had been slamming into rocks the whole time, and mine maybe touched once. And when we got to the end, we noticed that there was oil coming from the bottom of his engine, and one of the bolts from the skid plate had slammed straight into his engine and made a little hole in it. And so my drops here and there from my total lack of skill and utter fatigue seemed minor when his bike was in a Delica van headed out, right? And it was fine. We fixed. He had it fixed and everything, but he raised the bike after that. He wasn't messing around with that, and so a lot of these the first thing that they do when they lower these bikes is they take it out of ground clearance, and that makes the bike less capable, right? And then sometimes they also take it out of suspension travel. So it depends on how the bike is lowered. You can actually reduce the travel. And so what sort of effect would that have on riding?
I know, it was like when it comes down to suspension, we've been doing stuff for Odins and everything, and I personally I took the training class. I got certified for Odins and everything, and suspension is a very, very delicate topic, right? And no matter on road or off road, and it is, I don't know. I mean, off road itself, when you get into dual sport riding, into adventure riding, everything, there's so many different levels, right? And so you cannot really say one is wrong, one is right. What I see, the majority of people are like your friend in the beginning, they just want to have fun, right? They're not too much into, okay, what kind of technique am I using, whatever, just like, it's just, the weekend warriors, right? And nothing wrong with that, the only problem I have is then, for example, what happened to your friend, luckily he could ride out and everything, it's also not good if you're leaking oil into a river, whatever, that's also not really good, right? But yeah, it's just, what I sometimes hear is like, oh, the bike sucks, right? Or whatever, blaming the bike then, it's like, no, like the bike should have been taller, that's simple, right? But because you want to pedal, right? Just now when you were talking about, people, pedaling and dapping, all around, that one video from of Brett Hacks came into my mind with, like, I think these 9 things where he was ranting about it. One of the first things was that, it's like, there are instructors actually teaching this and stuff, and I completely agree with him. Like the occasional dap, yes, right? It is actually important and can save you and it is necessary, but like just doing this for a long distance, that's not really riding, this is, I don't know, it's kind of like a push bike for a 3-year-old or 4-year-old, I don't know, right? But yeah, the thing is, we've been just recently, these last few days, we've been talking about this in my ADV group as well, and yeah, I mean, in Taiwan, Asia, people usually are not as tall, including myself, right? So yes, I mean, you want to have that comfort and that, that reassurance that you could, put a foot down and hold the bike, right? Now on small bikes, your chances in a situation like you said, your friend or you, going through the waterbed, through the riverbed, the water, right? Putting your foot down and it was loose, whatever. Even a 100 kg bike eventually will become very heavy and you cannot hold it, right? Now, that's what I tell always my students is, now imagine a 200 kg bike, a 250 kg bike. There's no way you can hold that bike, plus you will ruin your knees, you'll break your legs, whatever, so you have to be very, very careful, right? But the thing is, like, most, for example, GSs in Taiwan, they are Asia models, so they're lowered. Then they put on the lower seat. And sometimes when I have to ride some of my students' bikes, I'm actually at that point where I don't feel comfortable because I can put both feet down. Plus, when I stand up, there's even air between the bike and me. And that's just wrong to me at that point, This just feels, that's not an adventure bike anymore, right? But that's just me. But this is the thing, it's like, where do you have that, where do you put the norm, that standard, right? And obviously, a newbie has a different norm than a veteran. and it's simple, right? But it is, in retrospect, it's always easier to have that shock and awe approach for me, because you just get over it quickly, and you're done with it, right? And you focus from the very beginning on technique, balance, right? Standing positioning, looking ahead, all these things, in order to, don't have to be afraid when I, stop the bike. Where do I park? We have this also sometimes. People, they have no problem riding, but as soon as they come to a standstill, they drop the bike, right? So it's like, yeah, I mean, it's the same thing, off road. It happens on road here as well sometimes, but especially off road, you don't just stop wherever you want to, because there might be a decline, there might be a smaller rut, whatever. Even 1 centimeter makes a huge difference, right? So you look where you want to stop, and if it's okay, you stop there. You don't stop somewhere else, right? So you always have a plan, And the thing is, if you lower the bike to, let's say, a lower level of technique, that plan is not, it's very short-sighted. Let's put it this way, and so. Yeah, that's why, I mean, a lot of people, they know Jocelyn Snow, right? They know a lot of short riders, and that's the funny thing, It's like they're like, oh yeah, like no sexism implied, but like a short woman can ride this, like, yeah, but if she can ride it, why don't you? You can do it as well, right? And I don't know her, but she seems very nice, and it's like, if she can do it, why can't other people do it as well, right? So yeah, but so try it.
Yeah. She's definitely on the extreme end of it, along with Megan Griffith,
Oh
who
yeah,
rides a full size KTM, 300, and those are like 38-inch seat heights, just stratospherically tall. And we'll get into the techniques a little bit that they use. Their techniques are kind of extreme, right? Most of us don't need to use anything like they do. Because we're in the normal range. But coming back to when they lower it, if you put a link in it, and you lower the whole bike a little bit, you're taking out of ground clearance. We mentioned that, but many times they put in shorter springs, and that takes it out of suspension travel. So a adventure bike will have usually around 7 or 8 inches of suspension travel, some of them a little more. And a dirt bike will have usually about 12. An enduro bike will have usually about 12. And the reason for that is because it needs to be soft on the top to absorb the softer hits, and then it needs to have bottoming resistance. So it's got to go through the stroke. And so what you find with these short bikes a lot of times, the CRF 250L, it's a great bike in many ways, but when it comes stock with the lower model, it has very soft suspension. So all the models basically have really soft suspensions, and so you're going to blow through that travel really quickly. And if you lower it, you're going to blow through it even faster. And when you bottom out, the bike loses traction, it loses control. And a bottomed out suspension is really scary. I've done it a few times on the street. I had an FZ 150 with a horrible rear shock, and I was just out of the seat. When a shock bottoms, it throws you forward, and it's really scary. And I've been fortunate. My off-road bikes have had an insane amount of travel, and I'm really light. So I can't remember the last time I bottomed a shock out. To keep it from bottoming, you would have to make it really stiff. You could, if you have clickers, you can crank in the clickers, you can crank in the preload and make it super stiff. And then that just makes it rough over all of the little stuff. So it's very important that you have suspension travel. Did you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, I mean, you just mentioned it. It's like usually what they do is when they shorten the stroke, usually to make up for the shorter stroke, they put in harder springs. and that makes a huge difference then when you go off-road riding, because sometimes for certain events you need harder springs, but a lot of times you don't, right? And so if they don't up the spring rate, it is way too soft, like you said, and especially with the CRF 250 and the 250 Rally and now the 300 and 300 Rally, it is so funny because it's so soft. You just pick up the bike from the kickstand and you already lose a third of the stroke. So, but the problem is with the Asia models, you already lost a third of the stroke, and now you pick it up. You're still not on the bike. You just you just straighten it up, right? And you lose another like a third on top of that, right? So, yeah, and I have the same experience. It's just a terrible feeling when your suspension bottoms out, right? Let alone it's not good for the suspension, right? But it just feels terrible. Right, and I just hate that feeling when metal just, I mean, a lot of suspensions they have now the top out springs and everything, right? But still, it's not supposed to be. That's like the very last resort, and if that happens once a year, no problem, But if it happens every single ride, even though it's just once, it's still not good. Let alone the geometry, So on my Africa Twin, you could adjust the seat height by 2 centimeters. Sometimes in very rough terrain, I lowered it just to get my foot a little bit better on the ground. But then, for example, I could not ride that bike on road within the lower seat positioning because the bars were all of a sudden higher because you sit 2 centimeters lower, and the whole geometry changes. Your weight distribution changes. So, I could not ride that bike on the road to have fun. I had to every time put it back into standard position. That was brilliant. I loved the bike, even though with the softer suspension, I loved it on road. It was great, even with faster speed. But yes, if you mess with the suspension, and like you said, you have the Asian model with a shorter spring, but then you crank the preload. And what the preload actually does, it just a smaller margin of hardening the spring rate. It's not really hardening, just a little bit. But what the preload actually does is it raises the bike, right? If you crank it down, right? So it doesn't make any sense. You get the Asia model because it's lower, and then you crank it up again because it's you want to have a little more stroke, because if not, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is, I mean, there are short people that maybe 150. Yes, there's no way, because even with technique, it's just no fun whatsoever. Okay, but we're going to talk about that in a sec, but there are other ways, like to me, this is the worst thing to do on an off-road capable bike, no matter to what extent, to mess with the suspension. Right, yeah. And like you said, that will affect also ground clearance, and you might be able to put your foot down, but you get caught on a rock or on a log frequently, and that's also not fun, right? Yeah. So, and you will like your friend, it will eventually damage your bike.
Yeah. And what I see that's worse than taking it out of suspension is when people put 17-inch wheels to lower a bike. And I had a guy recently ask me about that, and I was like, no, that's the last thing you do.
You can talk about that.
Because,
your experience.
Yeah, because I started out on a bike that came with 17s, and it was a real mission to switch over to a 21, and I eventually did that, and I was like, where was this all of my life? Because with the 17, the front is so wide and it's so short that it just deflects over everything, and you're just back and forth all the time, and it doesn't want to roll over anything, and to lower the capability of your bike just to feel more comfortable is definitely not the way to go. If you're a shorter person, or maybe if you're even not a shorter person and you just want to feel more comfortable and you lower the seat, fine. You haven't hurt the capability of the bike at all. That is just a comfort thing. I fully endorse that, lowering the seat if that's what you want to do, but don't take away the capability, because as you progress, you'll need all of that capability, and you'll be trying to raise it up again so that you get that back. And so what are some of the techniques that we can use to mitigate seat height as an issue?
First of all, balance, right? Like I said, the first thing that you have to just completely abandon is just 2 feet on the ground, right? That just means what you can do is just place one whole foot on the ground. Some people are even that short they cannot even put one whole foot flat on the ground. They can just maybe the balls of the feet, whatever. That's the max of the extension to it, right? Whatever they can do, but balance, right? And I mean, to be honest, that's part of the fun off-road riding. I haven't met anyone who rides off-road riding because they enjoy the stability of the bike. It's part of the game that the bike bounces around and deflects off rocks and stuff like that. It's part of the game, right? So balance is one key. So I mean, you've seen these exercises, when, a lot of times with BMW, where you pick up the bike right from the kickstand, you put the kickstand in, and then you walk around the bike, right, and then one-handed, and stuff, and that's the thing, it's like that's what we also explain to people during our ADV introductional events. It's just a lot of people no matter on-road bikes the same, they try to hold up the bike at a traffic light, and sometimes it's even funny. You can actually, if in Taiwan some traffic lights they're like 2 minutes long, right, and like that one leg starts to quiver then, and like any bike from a 125 up to the GSA, right? They don't weigh anything if they stand up, upright. That's simple. If they stand 90 degrees, you can hold it with your pinky. That's simple, all right? So one of the techniques that you should be focusing at is to always and quickly find the balance point where the bike stands up on its own. So this is a lot what we're also trying to teach people, and as fast as possible. So balance. It is really about being in harmony with your bike and trying to find the balance most of the time. I mean, that's how you can have a safe ride, an enjoyable ride, no matter if you stand or if you ride. If your bike is if you are in harmony with your bike, if you find that balance, then it's okay, right? It's easy to ride. You're having fun. You're in control even if the front or the rear breaks out, right? So the balance that part is really key, right? So at that point, it doesn't matter how tall your bike is. It doesn't matter how heavy your bike is, right? So that would mean, to a certain extent, that your butt half or completely has to move to the side, either the left side or the right side, right? At a traffic light or when you come to a complete stop, right? So that's the thing. Really get over it, right? And really move your butt to one side, get your whole foot on the ground, and you're just assisting your bike to stand. Your bike can stand on its own. That's it, right? So that's the main technique that you need, basically, right? Let your bike stand up on its own, and you're just assisting it once there is a side breeze or whatever, that's it, right? But don't, just push the bike or try to hold up the bike with one leg, because that's going to be, you can cancel your World Gym membership card then, right? So, and if you drop your bike, when you drop the bike, because you will drop your bike then, it's not going to be fun. Right? So that's the main technique, right? Just learn to know how to let your bike stand up on its own.
Yeah. I heard an instructor say that everything with a motorcycle comes down to traction and balance. And either you lost your traction or you lost your balance, or both, right? And one of the ways to keep that is, like you said, like get your butt off the bike. Like so many times I see people, they sit their butt in the middle of their seat and then they put both legs out, and they don't seem to know which way their bike is going to go, whether it's going to go left or right. But there's so many situations when you're off road where going left is not an option. There's just space underneath your foot, and if you're on a side hill, or maybe there's a hole or something, and then planning that, balancing the bike and planning it, and knowing, okay, I'm going to put my foot on the right side because the left is a cliff. It's kind of funny, and then a lot of work when people try to lean their bike downhill. We've had that happen a couple of times, and then getting used to having it a habit that your butt is off of the seat, because I don't know how many times, every ride almost, I'll put my foot down and I think, oh, it's not very far to the ground, and then I realize, oh, the ground is soft, my foot moved, the rock rolled, my foot went a hole, and it's a lot farther than I thought. And then, if my butt is off the seat, my butt just goes down, and then my leg is right across the seat, and I can still control the bike. The bike is upright. I haven't changed the balance of the bike at all. My butt has gone down. My weight has moved off of the bike, but everything's good. And then I can just continue on. And if you make that a habit, if you ride off road a lot, it will just become a habit. And, like you say, like sometimes being on the pegs is the way to balance it, because you have more control. You can push left, push right. And the slower you can go, standing on the pegs, the better your balance is going to be, the more control you're going to have. And then when you do need to step off, when you do need to dab, you can get your weight right off, and you can plant your foot where you want to instead of being stuck on your butt. But I wouldn't say that that's what you should do in all situations at all. There's plenty of situations where I sit with my butt on the seat to weight the rear tire, and I'm using my legs strategically to try and balance the bike and do things. There are different techniques. It's not like there's just one technique to use. But yeah, and then these techniques, for really short people who ride full-size bikes like Jocelyn Snow and Megan Griffith, you see them take this to an absolute extreme, where their leg is way up on the bike, and Megan does these. She practices standing on the bike and then loading the front suspension up and then popping over things, and standing up on the pegs with the bike sitting still. And I'm not really at that level. I can do it a little bit, but I'm not at all at that level. But it's kind of something to work toward, I think.
No, but again, it's like at that point, for example, like you mentioned, Megan Griffith, for example, having the front wheel already halfway onto a log, right? And she gets on the bike and stuff. This is actually an advantage being short, right? Because the taller you are, the more mass you have to move. The leverage is higher, right? So there is no, like being tall has its advantages and disadvantages. So it's when you're short, right? No, but yeah, it is sometimes when we have trainings or we have some ride outs, like with some of my students, I just, I joke around as like kind of, I stare at their butts and they're like, what are you looking at? And it's like, well, I'm just trying to locate your Velcro, because it just really seems lots of riders, their butts, their pants, they're Velcro to the seat, it's just impossible for them to move around. There's a reason why, especially for dirt bikes, why the seat is so long, right? and narrow, right? Like you said, it depends on the situation, right? The terrain and everything, so many factors. That's why you have such a huge, huge but long seat, because you can move so much, right? But yeah, balance, that's what it comes down to. And you have to be able to move quickly. Like what I see a lot of times is, not all the time, but a lot of times we ride standing, right? And when it comes to that point where you have to dab, where you have to put your foot down, where you have to stand, I see many people, they do this two-step thing. They come to a standstill, or almost to a standstill, or they suddenly have to put their foot down, whatever. It's this two-step thing. From a standing position, first butt down on the seat, and then foot down, right? And then, for example, when they realize, oh crap, the ground is further away than expected, then the Velcro kicks in, right? And then usually the bike tips over, right? But if you go from a standing position on the bike to standing position off the bike with one leg, like you're not really affecting the balance so much, right? Because you can still have the bike up 90 degrees and move your weight to the side, right? While still weighing the outer peg to keep that balance, right? And using some other techniques, and you can place your foot down. And if the ground is further away, then it's just further away, right? And your butt is off the bike anyways, so the seat thing and the Velcro thing is not affecting you at all, right? But obviously from standing, especially certain ADV bikes are pretty tall, on the bike, going from standing on the bike to standing next to the bike, well, it takes some practice, right? And you have to know what you're doing. But this is the thing, if you do this two-step thing, usually what I've seen, unless the bike is light and low, you will find yourself in trouble at one point, right? You will, 100%, right? And usually the bike tips over, right? And then just, if it's a light bike, then, it's okay. If it's a big, heavy bike, then hopefully your leg is not underneath the bike. That's simple, right? Because then you're going to have really fun.
Yeah, yeah, and you mentioned advantages that shorter people have, and one of them is good habits. Like when you're short and you do any sort of off-road stuff and you're riding taller bikes, you have to think about all of these things, and so before you even get to technical stuff, you already have these good habits in place. Whereas when we're a little bit taller, it's easier to be lazy because you never thought of it before. You're riding on the road, you get into a parking lot, you're turning around, and you can just dab your feet. It's so easy. And we don't even think about these things that shorter people have to deal with all the time. And, I didn't think of it until I got a Supermoto that was, 37 inches tall, and I could only touch the tips of my feet down at red lights. And that's when I started doing, the dirt bike, stance where you slide your butt off the bike. And then that kind of led me into off-road. And so, it just comes down to technique and practice. And then another thing I noticed is just experience. When you're riding and you're riding in technical stuff, and you don't know what the bike is going to do, then your feet will be in the wrong location, your weight's going to be in the wrong place, because you haven't predicted what the bike will do. And as you get more experience, you'll know, like you'll have this sense, like, oh, there's a rock, and it's going to kick the rear, or there's a rut here, and I'm going to get off balance. I can feel this coming. And you learn it without even realizing that you're learning it, because you just ride. And so, get out there and ride. Just get out there and ride, and don't lower your bike unless you absolutely have to, and it'll come to you. It will.
It will, definitely. I mean, it's again, we spoke about that before. Like, I hate dropping my bike, I hate crashing, but I know I will. That's simple. I do my very best not to, but I know I will. And I know that I'm always wearing my gear, so the chance of me getting hurt, my bike has crash bars, everything. Well, not crash, but big skid plate because I'm riding a 790. And even I don't think it needs really crash bars, but like my bike is protected, I am protected, I should be fine. I'm not going crazy, so I should be fine. Now the thing is that's my last point now is if you lower your bike, if you get an Asia model, whatever, right? What happens once you want to go back to normal height, or what happens when you switch bikes? Right? Because every bike will be a bit different in seat height. Now, the thing is, like, you might have to spend another extra money, whatever, to get it to that, height that you feel comfortable with, whatever. But the thing is, like, you will always be relying on the hardware. Now, if you get over it, if you find a technique to feel comfortable, even though it is too high for you, that is good for life. No matter what bike you switch, right? That tuning accessory is universally used, right? You can use that on any bike that you will buy from now on, right? So if you don't learn that, you always have to be considering the hardware. You always have to, okay, I want this bike, but does it come in a shorter suspension stroke version, right, and stuff like that. But once you get over it, you have the technique, you have the experience, you have the skill sets, then you're free. That skill is not limited to any kind of bike type, model, brand whatsoever, right? And you'll be fine. You'll free.
Yeah, and like you said, your bike should have crash bars on it and stuff, and we'll probably do an episode in the future about the things that you outfit your bike with. And if you're riding an off-road bike, it should be able to take a tip over. And if you're riding so fast that you're likely to get hurt if you come off, that's a whole nother thing. Because this doesn't have to do with seat height. You're hopefully on the pegs if you're going that fast. And I'm very, very careful when I'm doing higher speeds. Anything above 10 or 15 kilometers an hour. Really, if I'm in third gear and up, I'm really, really careful because get-offs in third, fourth, fifth gear are very serious, and that's where you end up in the hospital. Whereas seat height issues, a tip over now and again, rarely does anyone ever end up in the hospital because of those. And if the bike is protected, the bike's also fine, right?
Exactly. No, it's seat height. I mean, a lot of people only see the negative sides to it, right? But there are lots of positive sides, and they definitely clearly outweigh the negative sides, right? And to me, I mean, to be a little more direct, to me, it just shows your commitment. That simple, right? Because people who really want to enjoy off-road riding, and I'm not saying that people who don't want to or who want to have lowered bikes, I'm not saying that they don't enjoy off-road riding, but what I'm talking about is like 100%. Who have a different mindset, yeah, I mean, you have that to ride and not to stop, right? And yes, it just takes one red light to drop the bike and hurt yourself and stuff. I get that, right? But the thing is, like, to me, a lot of times, and some people might get angry at me for that, but it just sounds like an excuse, right? And again, there are really short people, and fine, okay, but usually there is a way. And where there is a will, there's a way. That's simple. This is not our job. We're not professional racers, whatever. No one's forcing us to do that. So it's just for me personally, in my profession. It just shows the mindset of a person when they say, what, it is too high for me, but yeah, I wanna get over that obstacle, right? And I really want to learn how to do that, and that shows something, right? And I respect that, right? I also respect people who, I also have a student, he's a little bit shorter than me, almost the same height. He rides a WL450 and he has the same setup as you had before with two 17-inch tires because he said, I just don't feel comfortable, right? I spoke to him a couple of times and he's like, nah, that's just how it is. He enjoys it, even though the 17-inch are a little more nervous on roads and everything, right? But hey, he's having a good time. Who am I to say something, right? And he's not doing hardcore stuff. So he just, just metal riding and stuff. And then, hey, that's fine. That's cool. You're having fun. I have no problems with that. It's just, the thing is, some people, they just like to blame the hardware. So if you do that, then sorry, you have to give the hardware a fighting chance. That's simple, right? And if you ride a lowered bike, obviously, the hardware cannot perform as it's supposed to be. Simple as that.
Yeah. So we just want to leave you with that. Get out there, ride, practice, get training, and tune in next time for Sideways, the podcast about motorcycles in Taiwan.
So yeah.